Yeah, it was one of those things where God was like, here, I'm going to put you to school without you even realizing that you're in school. And then now we're going to use them. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, overwhelmed Christians who don't want to stay in that place, who want to live in true freedom and abundance and peace. I'm Liz Ferricks, and this is my husband, Evan.
Hi there.
And as you guys know, we are talking about calling this week and continuing to work our way through the CSCs. So since today is Wednesday, we're going to talk about being centered.
You might as well introduce it. Like we were just talking before the show. You've got these so on lock. Often we'll make notes before the show, and I'm off in left field somewhere with what I think we might end up talking about. And so we're trying to zero it in on here and stay on the same page.
Well, as I said, I've been working on applying the CSCs for the last 6 years. So...
And I've been hearing about them for just as long.
Yes, but hearing about them and practicing them are two kind of different things.
That's true. Yep.
So, I'm super excited that we get to talk about calling some more.
Yeah. So here, center means moving from who God made us to be, right?
Yes.
Our center
is of who we are.
That's a good way to put it.
Thanks. So with calling and being centered, without being centered, you don't have a calling. Like, there's just, and all of the CSCs are kind of that way, you know, like if you're not calm, you're in fight or flight mode and you can't be creative and you lose your ability to do your calling. If you're not surrendered, you lose your, the power of the Holy Spirit, and too bad, so sad, you can't do your calling. But if you're not centered, if you're not living out of the essence of who God made you to be, you're going to end up being an eye that's trying to do or an ear that's trying to see, and you're going to be miserable.
Would you say that, so the essence of who I am is part of who God made me to be?
Yeah.
But if I'm not in touch with that, like God's calling that guy, the who made me to be guy, and if I'm not in touch with who that is, I might hear God's voice, or I might, who knows what, and go off and try to do something that doesn't fit.
Yeah, I think sometimes, we have blinders on. It's kind of like we've talked before with your reticular activating system, where, that's the part of your brain that kind of sensitizes you to certain things that are relevant. And so if I say, look for all the yellow things in this room, wait 5 minutes, and then ask you to name everything that's white, you're going to be like, I didn't notice anything white. I was paying attention to the yellow.
Right. Or I've heard that described as the blue Honda issue.
Oh, yeah.
Where if you just bought a blue Honda, all of a sudden
there's
everybody has
of blue
a blue
Honda.
Right. It's because it's like you're paying attention to that now.
Right. Or, you're like, man, I'm so not cool anymore.
Yeah. Although in our case, both of our vehicles are white, and I would say 90% of the vehicles are white. So it's actually a real thing.
Yeah. So, yes, you notice what you're tuned into, and if you're tuned into a station other than the one you're supposed to be tuned into, you're going to totally miss out when there are opportunities to engage in what you specifically have been called to do.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important, and it increases my faith to constantly think about, because I need reminded about this all the time, that I've been created a specific way for a specific reason by God.
Preach it.
And that frees me to do my calling.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know. I think even in Christian culture, we just get so inundated with this idea of, like, the world is just so random, your DNA is random. I mean, it's based on your parents' DNA, but it's like a random, and, randomly you're alive now instead of 200 years ago. It's like, no, God's not random.
Right.
He's planned it out.
Yeah, like it says in Acts that he put all men in the time and the place that he wants them to be in. Like, he specifically made us to be now in the United States, if that's where you're listening from, or wherever else in the world you are.
Yeah, and isn't that amazing that he put that much forethought into it? That he wants a person like you to live in the state you live in and the city you live in, and with the family you have.
Right.
And that's amazing. Albert Einstein says, "God does not play dice." I love that quote.
That's such a great quote.
And so, yeah, there's no such thing as random.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. If you think that your personality is random, that God didn't specifically design you to be who you are.
You just kind of turned out a certain way, personality-wise.
Right. Go
Sure.
look at Carol Tuttle's stuff because,
That's good.
yeah, I mean, her personality, her energy type stuff is amazing. First of all, it's been really helpful for our family. But part of it, your facial features are part of it. And when you start seeing that, it's like, whoa, I have a body that God designed to fit with my personality.
Yeah.
And how crazy is that?
Right. I've never seen a personality test that keys in on actual physical, hardwired things, like
Right.
that. And it's not just facial features. There's a number of things that exist in the physical world that she's measuring to help
Right.
you determine what your type is out of 4. And it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah. Moving back to your experiences, calling comes out of your pain. Like so much of the things that we're passionate about, that's because they're under our skin because we had some kind of painful experience with them.
Yeah.
And if you ignore your pain, you lose your calling.
Yeah. And I think that pain could come from any number of places. I mean, definitely abuse and mistreatment, but even just the pain of being an individual and then growing up in a world where everybody else wants you to conform to this or to that. And so there's the pain of like conforming and denying yourself. And if you get used to doing that, then that essence of who you are guys way over there and you can't hear the call of God. So there's it. And then the pain's going to be, well, actually, I really just love archery and that's all I want to do. And that's part of who God made me to be. But, I never could do it growing up. And now getting back into it's going to be fairly painful because it's been denied for so long. But
Right. Well, and part of God's redemption process is to take those things that are painful and turn them into something beautiful.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking about this and thinking about how a lot of the time we end on one or the other side of the spectrum. Like either we deny our pain and we ignore it and we run from it, or we embrace it and wallow in it. And I was thinking about Paul, because he had a pretty stressful background in a lot of ways. Like, can you imagine if when he became a believer and he really realized, he considers himself a murderer for getting all these people imprisoned and sent to their deaths and all that.
The
and
chiefs are sinners, right?
Right. And so to say that and then to just stay there. Or to say, I'm not going to remember any of that. Like to just kind of push away everything that he had done in his past and everything that he had learned. And I guess I think of this because I love Paul. Like I love the way that he was so perfect for what God designed him to be. Like he just has an incredible understanding of grace because of his sin, not in spite of his sin, but because of his sin. And that kind of was the platform that he had for writing so much of the New Testament. And then the fact that he was a Pharisee gave him such an incredible background in the Old Testament and, his ability to bring that forward into the New Testament was just so beautiful.
Yeah, really amazing. Yeah, there's so many amazing connections. Like in his sermons in Acts, he's constantly bridging Jesus' death and resurrection with the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And it's opening people's eyes. It's really mind-blowing.
Right. So, I mean, the fact that he was a Pharisee and that he denied Christ and that he persecuted Christians, like that, out of that is where his calling came. And, when we're denying our pain, we lose out on that stuff. We're supposed to be utilizing it.
Yeah.
And you have to do the work to work through it to be able to, come out on the other side. But without it, our pain is meaningless, which to me, like that was such an impetus to be like, dang, I got to work through this junk because otherwise I'm wasting my time. I'm carrying my baggage. One of the most terrifying ideas to me is that what if I carry the same baggage my entire life? Like
Yeah.
I've seen people do that, and I'm
Sure.
just like, oh my gosh, please don't let that ever be me. You
Yeah, we're so
know?
precious about it sometimes. We guard it and we cherish it. And God's resourceful. He is going to take that stuff and recycle it into something amazing.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's his business.
definitely. And when I look at the things that I'm passionate about that God's done in my life, it's because of my pain. I mean, I ended up being I am very passionate about theology and helping people understand that it is both, you know, like let's study the Bible and then let's apply it, like rather than an either or.
Sure.
And that came out of my youth group splitting over theological things, like this huge, awful situation. I completely swore off theology, you know? I was like, never, theology just causes division. I'm never, ever,
Sure.
ever going to study it. People that study it they're wasting their time.
And then, so that was high school. And then when you went to college,
Yeah, and then when I went to college, I had a missions major and I had to take some theology classes because I went to Moody and I adored my theology classes. And I was like, oh man, look at this. This is not all just a waste of time. And it doesn't have to be divisive. And this changes everything about the way that we live.
yeah, it
So,
touches our real life. It's not
yes.
just an ivory tower thing somewhere. It's not just thought exercises. It's real stuff.
Right.
When I was thinking about calling and, the faithfulness it takes to work that out, I was thinking of that famous passage in Hebrews where the writer's talking about by faith this guy did this and by faith this guy did that. And like there's a
Yeah.
whole list of heroes of the faith there moving in their calling and doing these amazing things through the power of the Holy Spirit. And so that's just kind of an amazing thing to read through, find, just to look up more inspiration like Paul.
Yeah. Although some of their inspiration is like, by faith, they got their heads cut off and were fed to the lions. And
Yeah.
so it's that, like, by faith, they were able to trust God in the middle of even that.
Yeah. Well, and there's even, but God plays the long game. I mean, some of
Totally.
these stories, okay, so a story of somebody dying or the story of the widow who gave 2 pennies to the temple. I mean, she's world famous now and rich in the faith.
Yeah.
And but anyway, one of the tricky things is when we're thinking about our calling is sorting out that the difference between the cultural stuff, like you were talking about with your youth group, like, oh, theology just divides people. It's just something to argue about, and then finding out that it's a real, heavenly principle that can actually touch the real world. So sorting out sorting out the cultural stuff from the actual hardwired personality stuff.
Yeah.
So a good example of that, and actually it's an open-ended story, but in this book that we've been reading at church, When the Church Was a Family by Joseph Hellerman, there's a story in there about this guy who, in the early church, maybe, I don't know, less than 200 years after Christ, I think, somewhere in the Mediterranean Sea area, because that's where all that stuff happens. But this actor came to faith, and the acting community was even more corrupt than Hollywood back then. Like, it was
Hard to
just,
imagine.
yeah. Well, it's coming out now that maybe they're on par with each other. And so it was a dilemma, right? This guy's a Christian, but he's part of this culture. And so they were like, you can't be an actor anymore. And he's like, okay, I get it. I won't be an actor anymore. But then what's he go and do is he opens an acting school. He becomes an acting teacher. And his local pastor is like, well, he's submitting himself to the authority of the church.
Actor.
Right. And so he writes to his mentor, some other city, and it's like, what do we do about this guy? I mean, he's really passionate about his faith, but he's teaching acting now. And the guy's like, well, he's got to quit doing that too. But since we're taking away his livelihood, the church will support him until he can find another job. So in that case, that's a radical stripping away of a cultural thing. Like, he learned to be an actor. He learned to move in that kind of subculture, and then he come to faith, and that wasn't a godly principle thing. It wasn't part of his hardwired DNA personality thing, evidently, because God was able to strip it away.
Yeah.
And it doesn't say in the book what he ended up doing, but I mean, I think there'd be pain there, like you were talking about, having to walk away from that life and
Right.
missing it. But then also I mean, if maybe he was a speech, good at giving speeches or a preacher or something, who knows,
Right.
because
Yeah, I was
he
just
learned some
thinking
skills.
about that.
Yeah. So the calling is unique to who we are, and that's what we want to move out of.
Right.
There's just so many examples. It's fun to think about.
Definitely. Yeah, I love thinking about how different things that we've learned over time, prepare us for what we're supposed to do. And I was even thinking about my love for literature. I don't remember learning how to read. I learned at such an
Yeah.
early age, and I've always read, and it wasn't until, I've always written also, but it wasn't until just getting sick and being like, okay, my options are really limited. What am I going to do? That I was like, okay, I'm going to really write. But I feel like so much of my understanding of what good writing looks like is based on, a couple decades of
Yeah.
reading so many different things.
You're a student of literature.
Right.
Just, so immersed in it.
Yeah, it was one of those things where God was like, here, I'm going to put you to school without you even realizing that you're in school. And then now we're going to use that. So real quick, one practical thing to think about is, what are your past experiences? Is there pain in your life? And are you in that place where you're just ignoring it? Because you might be ignoring your calling. All right, we love you guys and we are praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been sharing the show. We really appreciate it. And as you guys know, we firmly believe the more people that are living in the CSCs, the better the entire body of Christ is going to be. And hopefully, you guys have found this helpful to just be daily reminded. I know I need that daily reminder, especially in the morning, to kind of set up my day for success. So, yeah, having that reminder that, the CSCs are still important. They're still the way to move out of crazity.
That's right. Yeah. Keep coming back.
Yep.
This is a good place to be.
Exactly. And tomorrow we are going to talk about calling some more and being connected to people and connected to the Lord. It'll be awesome.
Yep.
So come back.
That's good. See you then.